Hey YouTube, it's JP Dillon. Welcome to part 2 of the service on the Sansui QRX-9001 top-of-the-line 4-channel. In our previous episode, we went over the power supply to make sure that was working correctly because there was lights up, no sound, and we were having deflection on the meters where we shouldn't have, which turned out to be just the calibration tone on the Dolby system had been switched on somehow, but push come to shove, it was actually a problem with the amplifier. And all the amplifier fusible resistors, although had been replaced, were out of tolerance to the point where the machine would not function. So we replaced all those and we got the amplifier to work. However, there is no sound on the front channels and the rears are very muffled. So we're going to see if we can do some signal troubleshooting and see. Let's see, I actually have to apply power to this first. There we go. Alright, so it comes out of Protect. Currently, I have no sound on the front channels. If I go to 4-channel, I get had a little bit of bleed through here. We get bleed through from the FM, but we would turn that off. So let's see, hook the scope up and see if we can figure out where the signal loss is. Alright, so here's the scope hooked up. We can see that we have some trash on the right front channel, but it will pass the signal. It's just the meters aren't registering for some reason, so we'll need to figure that one out. Let's go back to 2-channel. We're good there, and go to quad mode. Alright, so we have that there. So we just don't have any deflection on our meters. I can crank this up and the meters just don't show. And if I crank it all the way up, we get a little bit of bleed through the back. So the back meters are working. Let's see if I can fade it to the front. Fade it to the back. Alright, so that's probably hooked up. The meters are probably hooked up correctly. Let's have a listen to hear what that sounds like. So I've got the sound in the right speaker. That's cell noise, which we seem to pick up a lot around here. Why it's only the right front channel and nothing else, I'm not sure. But that definitely is. Oh, and we're not registering anything because I'm using a set of headphones to get the sound out. So that's why we're not seeing anything on the scope. But that's the noise we're hearing. And that's what it looks like there. And so I bet if I go get my RF blanket and cover this thing, that'll go away. And so what I have here is this is an RF blanket that has silver and copper woven into the fabric. And it's specific to between about 800 megahertz and about 5 gigahertz, so it will usually filter out the noise. And so let me cover this thing with it. And now that it's covered, we see that the signal is absolutely quiet. So we can even crank up the sensitivity. We see that it's absolutely quiet. So that garbage is actually RF that's being picked up by the set itself, because if I grab a hold of this and pull it away, noise is back. So that's going to be fun trying to combat that while we're troubleshooting. But the good news is that the front channels are working. Well, let me hook up the rear channels real quick just to make sure that they're happy. And with the rears hooked up, you can see the out of phasing there by the decoder, which changes as I change modes. So that makes kind of sense there. And you can see that hash is still there. And if I just grab the blanket here again and we hold it up in front of the machine, right where the preamp is, that seems to calm it down some. If I cover it completely, it will go away. But the rear channels are working. So we have both front and rear. Sorry to make everyone dizzy here today. So both front and rear are working, which is really good. So really, it's just a matter of troubleshooting these meters, because the rear ones are working, the front ones are not, and the lamps are a separate issue that we'll take care of, but there's no registration on the front meters. There's just 0. Rears work, fronts don't. So let's peer down in here. Zoom in on that a bit. Yeah, hard to tell. I don't see any obvious broken wires, but that really doesn't mean anything. Yeah, that goes over here, which is your meter selection board. Now what I noticed was, it's currently in Dolby. If I turn Dolby on, the meters do work, so electrically they're fine. Maybe it's just this switch that's touchy here. Let's work this switch a bunch. Okay, so that switch is just dirty, which is really good. That makes me happy. Really pissed about that interference, but what can you do? I can't surround the building with a cage because it's not my building. Otherwise, I could build a Faraday cage for this place that would pretty much keep any RF out. But not my building, so can't do that. So this is all good. This is very good. That means that our front and rear channels are working. He already cleaned the switches and controls because there's like no noise to them at all, except for the meter switch here, which is really dirty. I can just kind of touch this and the meters will cut out. So we gotta, yeah, clean that switch. We'll check the radio and stuff too. This is going to be a short series. I'm kind of disappointed, actually. Oh, those tape monitor switches are kind of touchy. All right, so we need to take care of that. But otherwise, it's looking pretty good. Wrong knob placement. That's going to bother me. There we go. A little bit of OCD. All right. So now that we know that, we need to clean these guys, clean this guy over here for the meters. But otherwise, it's pretty happy. So this was like a real easy fix, which is good. Okay. But we're going to add some bonus content. I'm curious to know if this guy took out the blending resistors or not. So here are the infamous quad decoders. And on all the third generation that use the F2088 and 2087 boards, there's a modification you can do to improve interchannel selectivity, or separation rather. First one on the 2088 is R601 there, which bleeds between front and back. It's a 220K. Pull it out. Now, before you pull it out, you need a signal generator that's capable of producing out of phase and 2 channels of output, because in order to calibrate the decoders, you need 1 kilohertz out of phase between the left and the right channel. But we'll get to that process. And on the 2087 board, there are 2 blending resistors, which are 10K, and that's one right there. It's R39 and R40. And if we can just see down here, the one we were just looking at there is R40. So that's a 10K right there. That's one of them. You need to remove that guy. And then R39 is just below and to the right of it. So right there. So what that does is that removes a blend between the front and rear channels and front left, rear right, and front right, rear left. The reason why they put those blend resistors in there is because there was a lot of material that was still maybe monaural in some sense, and they wanted to blend it to the rear so that it seemed more, forward channel, even though it wasn't. So we will go through the calibration procedure, which might be difficult because I think I'm going to need a second camera for that, and my second camera battery decided to poof up and damage the camera, so that's why we have a different camera on this series. But anyways, we'll get to cleaning these guys and this meter switch, and then we'll get to doing the blending resistor removal and setup of the decoders. So let's get to that. So thankfully, the switches I need to get to are very accessible here. Let me go grab a can of contact cleaner. And deoxit's okay to use on these switches. Don't use D5 on any of the potentiometers. Use Fader-Lube instead, or CRC-QD, or Neutral 401B, or something like that. So there's openings on the side. Just get some of the contact cleaner in there. Work it back and forth a bunch. You can also liberally blast it inside. Openings up top here. Just saturate it and work it a bunch. I don't have anything here to test CD4, so I'm probably not going to do the CD4 calibration. Pretty sure the owner's cool with that. I can send a pilot signal through and see if the demodulator comes on, but that's about the extent of it because somebody was nice enough to steal my CD4 test record. A good reminder that if you own a shop in the public eye, I don't own this shop, I just work for it, but that is an example. If you are in the public eye and you leave your test stuff out, people will go, ooh, this is cool, and usually pocket it and run. But yeah, that's a whole nother thing. People are shitty. Alright, so we're cleaning this up. He's already replaced the protection relay, I can see from here. While I'm at it, let's clean the speaker selector switch. See, he's replaced that relay, that's fresh. Which is good, because the original one was kind of junky. Alright, just so that's clean. Now let's go ahead and move to the meter control switch up top. So this is a little trickier to get to, but your goal is you don't have to remove the circuit board. What you do is you get the cleaner down into the latch holes there. That's the center gap on the white thing. If you get your contact cleaner in there, capillary action will suck it in, and then you can work the switch and clean it up. But that's really all you need to do here to clean that. So what I'm going to do here, let me hold this steady as best possible. Then I'll see if I can get some contact cleaner in here as a good example. I'm not blasting it in because then it'll go through the front panel. I'm going to trickle it in there and then work the switch a bunch. You can see the latch moving inside the gap. And we'll do the same for the meter selector switch. And this will usually take care of the problem with the meters. And here I thought I was going to have to troubleshoot some meter circuitry, but apparently that's not the case today. Alright, so we should be good there. Let's go ahead and turn this on now. I get front meter registration, good. Turn auxiliary on. Alright, so we have nice signal there. Switch over to 4-channel. And we got signal in our rears, so everything's registering good. That makes me pretty happy. The guy destrung the tuner, so we'll restring that one up, but that comes last. What we're going to work on next is removing the blending resistors from the decoder boards, and then I'll go through the calibration procedure. Again, you're going to need a signal generator that properly does out of phase between left and right. That's really how you're going to do it, because otherwise you can't calibrate the rear channels very well. So anyways, let's get the decoder boards out. So this is pretty easy procedure. Again, R601 gets removed, and then R39 right there, and R40, which is right over here. You can see the nomenclature there, but they're two 10K resistors, and that's brown, black, yellow. Or no, that's 100K. Are we talking 10K or 100K? 100K resistors. Yeah, I'm an idiot. 100K resistors for R39 at 40, and the 220K for R601. So we're just going to desolder those and remove them. So let's get into a position here. There's 601 right there that needs to come out. Get my solder wick. And make sure you're pulling the right thing. You don't have to put anything in its place. You just take it out. It's just blending front and rear channels. So 601's out. And let me trim back the solder braid. And we'll work on R39 and R40 here. And R40's this guy right there. And then R39's not too far away. I think it's just down in there. That should be this guy. Alright, so they're both loose. Let's grab some hemostats here and yank those two out. So that's that. That's your blending resistor removal. The 220 just flew onto the floor, but there's the 100Ks right there. So we just take those out. Now we can reinstall these, and then we'll do the decoder calibration and make sure that it's happy. Okay, so now we're going to go through the decoder calibration. Now, what you really need are two separate signal generators, and if they're a grounded instrument, you need to lift the grounds on them. Otherwise, when you tie them together to the receiver, you're going to get some cancellation, and at least one or more channels will get shorted to chassis. So they need to float from ground. So what I have is nominally an app on my phone that does it all through a stereo cable. But if you don't have that, or you want to demonstrate it, I have a main signal generator up here, and then I have a handheld which I have wired out of phase, which you will need to do. Excuse me. So the first thing I'm going to do here, we're going to turn this to 2-channel mode, turn it on, and we're going to check and see that we have 25 volts on pin 5 of the 2088 board. That's your decoder logic board. And the down here, you can see the pins are numbered, so we need to go to pin 5. And if we go to pin 5 very carefully, we see there's only 20 volts there. It needs to be 25. Don't attempt to do the calibration until you get that voltage right. The adjustment pot's over here. You got to turn that super slow. So I'm going to use both hands here and then to adjust this carefully and move these wires out the way so I don't slip with my probe and blow something up. And then I'll show you we got the 25 volts. So they are 25.037. So now that we got that, we're going to turn up a signal here. I'm on auxiliary, and we're going to set our levels. Okay, I got too much of a signal here. Let's turn this down a little bit. Not sure what's going on here. This is new. I got a dirty switch or something. Now, ignore the stuff in the right channel. That's the cell noise. Trying to figure out why I'm getting this garbage here. That's a new thing that's shown up. Oh, we got a funky relay. We'll show you about that later, but long story short, that relay down there on that board needs to come apart and get all the contacts cleaned. Because when I switch between bridged and non-bridged, it goes away. Alright, so anyways, let's turn down the sensitivity a bit so we can get rid of a lot of that cell noise. Let me turn on the second generator. Trying to get it to sync is a little bit tricky. There we go. Alright. So we want to adjust this for about the same amplitude. We're using a 1 kilohertz. But we'll do that for later. And it doesn't show it's out of phase because of how I have the scope adjusted for synchronization. But anyways, that's important because that will affect our calibration. Alright, we're set to go. So what we're going to do first is you're going to connect your front and rear right channels. And then you're going to connect the left front channel signal only. You're going to make sure you're on 4-channel mode and that your decoder is set to QS. And what you're going to do is turn it up. And on the scope here, we see that we have a disparity, which don't worry about that just yet. So what you want to do on your 2088 board, let me steady this a little bit. Okay, on the 2088 board, what you're going to need to do is adjust VR4, which is that guy right there. Not him, he's 3. This is 4. And what you're doing when you're adjusting number 4 is you're looking to see, excuse me, if you can get the right front and rear channels low and equal as possible. And so what we find is is by adjusting the phase, we can't do that just yet. So I need to double check a few things, because right there, we should not see that. So either I got something hooked up wrong, because I'm supposed to be looking at right front and rear. Oops, sorry. Right front and rear. You're supposed to nullify those. So on the meters, they don't show, but on the scope it does. So I need to take a look at that real quick. And yep, I had a wiring error. So now when we turn these up almost to maximum, you can see that there's very little signal there. And if I adjust VR4, we can see that we now have disparity. But you're supposed to adjust this so that they're as low but equal as possible, which is about there. That's where our null point is. So now what we do is we switch, and we're going to play the right front input and measure the left front and rear output. Now that we got that hooked up, we're looking at left front and rear, which definitely have a disparity there and a little bit of rounding. And so we're going to lower these again until we get low but equal. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to connect a monaural signal to front, left, and right. And we're going to nullify the two rear channels. So again, signal at both left and right front. And we're monitoring left and right rear. And we're going to adjust VR2, I believe. Let me just double check that. Yeah, that's VR2, which is that guy right there. And we're going to adjust him to nullify the rear channels. And so again, we want low and equal as possible. And yeah, they're out of phase. That's normal. Okay, now here comes the fun part. Now what we do is, excuse me, we have to play the out of phase signal. So left and right channels are going to be 180 degrees out of phase of each other. And then we're going to adjust VR1 to nullify the front channels. Now, I've had issues with this before because of synchronization of signal generators and stuff like that. So I may just have to do it with the app on my phone, which you won't be able to see well. But we'll see how this works first. So you can download a function generator app for your phone and set it to 180 degrees out of phase between left and right and do the same thing. But let's see how our MacGyver setup works. And for some reason, now that I've switched on the decoder, it's wanting to fight me. So I'm going to have to do it my old-fashioned way, just with a single stereo output out of phase. But basically, you take your 180 degrees between left and right channels out of phase, and you use VR1 to nullify the left and right front channels. And once you've done that, it's in calibration. You should be able to enjoy some really wide 4-channel separation with the blending resistors removed. And I really recommend you do that because it's a really good sounding mod for this. You just got to be prepared to calibrate it afterwards. So let me go ahead and finish up the calibration here, and then we can move on to the next conundrum, which is going to be fun with the meter lamps and the dial pointer. Alright, so the next problem is the meter lamps. That's really where the 2 meters have gone out, but I verified that there is voltage at the lamp, the lamp terminals on the back of the meters, so we really just need to replace those. And it's not very fun to get at these, because that's where the meter lamps are, in those little rubber sockets. And they're usually brittle and they fall apart. and you have to get to those 2 points there on each side of the meter boards. Those are obstructed, obviously. Those ones there, those ones there. You got to desolder those and put new meters in. Now, if you want to take a shortcut, you can get a 12 volt, 5 millimeter LED lamp of your choice. They literally fit right in the hole. You pass the wires through there, and you're good to go. But we're going to use incandescents to match the other ones, because I'm not redoing all the lamps on this. That would take hours and hours of time, where I can just do the ones that need to be done. So anyways, let me show you what I'm going to do. I'm using these 50 milliampere 6 volt 4 millimeter lamps. You could technically squeeze a 3 millimeter into the old socket, but it's actually less time consuming to just use these and then wire them up. So it's not really practical to have the camera in the way to show you how I'm going to do it, so we're just going to take the old lamps out. I'm going to install the new ones, and then I'll show you what's been done. Very nice. Let me show you what I found. So on your left there, the one with the yellow leads, that's one of the new lamps. The other ones were okay. You can also see that the 22 ohm resistors have been changed, because they were both way high. One was 105 ohms, the other one was 300 ohms. Yet the other two on the front channels, which you figured would get more use, were okay. So I replaced the resistors, replaced a bad lamp, and now we have a really nice looking front panel with great illumination. Nice and equal. So now the next thing we have to deal with before we button this guy back up is restringing the tuner, and we need to find a dial pointer as well, because the dial pointer glass is broken there. I don't know if that was pre-existing or not. I think it was, according to the customer. So restring the dial, and then we need to take apart the bridging relay in the preamp and clean the contacts so that we have consistent channels front and rear. The distortion we saw earlier on the scope is a function of this guy down here, which hard to see, but that guy right there, that signal relay commonly gets oxidized, and then you have channel loss. But anyways, this will conclude part 2 of the Sansui 4-channel. We've got it playing now on both channels. We've got the decoders calibrated, and so now we just need to finish dealing with the other aspects of it, and then we can button this thing back up and send it on back to its owner. So anyways, thanks for watching, guys. More stuff to come.